Okay, well, let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. Again, welcome. First of all, because I know this is a big question, we'll probably announce it again later. We are recording the webinar and we will send you the recording tomorrow along with a copy of the slides. So you don't have to feel like you have to madly write everything down. You'll get a copy of everything tomorrow. And also, if a few slides are a little too fast for you, you can watch the recording tomorrow as well. So you will be getting that. You will notice on your Zoom screen that we do have interpreters tonight, which is great. So you can see Laura on the screen already doing her thing, right? So we've got ASL for people that need that. And then we've got a Spanish interpreter as well. So if you click on the interpretation button, well, you know what? I'm going to let Joanna tell you what to do here because she's much better at this than I am. So why don't you take that away? Go ahead, Joanna. You're muted. There you go.
Buenas noches. Vamos a empezar grabando esta noche y mañana van a recibir la información también que va a estar, si quieren ver otra vez el video. Ahorita vamos a empezar dando las reglas en cómo va a funcionar esta noche, todo lo que vamos a presentar. Y por favor, si ustedes ven la opción que dice para ir en español o bajen el volumen un poquito para que puedan escucharme a mí y por eso pueden traducirlo.
Okay, well, it is 7:04, so I think we're going to get going here. So again, for people that just joined, we are going to be recording this and we will be sending a copy of the slides. So you're all good on that front. Any other housekeeping? Oh, the other housekeeping, I just looked at my notes. Please put your questions in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. I'm going to introduce myself and my partner in crime here tonight. Matt Carpenter is going to introduce himself. Matt's going to be handling a lot of the Q&A. He's been doing this for decades. I don't think you're going to be able to stump him. So he'll be handling throughout. And then we'll also have Q&A at the end just to wrap up in case there's a few other questions. But please put it in the Q&A. If you want to be anonymous, you can click that box and you can put in an anonymous question. Okay. He's going to monitor if there are some Spanish questions that come in. We're going to play that by ear, how we handle them. But if you do have questions, actually, I guess, Joanna, you're going to want to explain that real quick.
Y vamos a presentarnos esta noche a los panelistas que ustedes están viendo, al señor Matthew Carpenter, a la señorita Peggy, que es la persona que estaba hablando. Si ustedes tienen alguna pregunta en español, al final del evento la pueden escribir y yo puedo traducirlas a las personas en el de panelistas. Por favor, cuando la señorita esté hablando, yo voy a estar hablando. Si un caso ustedes no me pueden escuchar, escríbanme un mensaje para yo saber. Muchísimas gracias.
So some of the, Peg, should I introduce myself quick before I get into housekeeping stuff?
Go ahead.
But before I do that, I don't know if there's anything we can do on our end, but some of the comments we're getting is that to turn on closed caption, and they're only able to see, some of the viewers are only able to see the speaker as opposed to everyone, specifically Laura doing ASL. And one attendee said that their view is locked, which I'm not having that issue on my end, and I haven't heard of that issue, but I wonder if any of our presenters has any answers to that. Otherwise, for anybody that's having the technical difficulties, again, you will get these slides, you will get the recording, you will get the script as well. And for those of you that are relatively new to Zoom or don't have a ton of experience, as you're looking at your screen, in the top right, there should be an icon that says view, and you want to click on that and make sure that you're on, you select gallery view as opposed to speaker. So that should be, that should be the solution. And hopefully that is the case, but that doesn't seem to be the feedback that we're getting. So let us see if we can work on something behind the scenes, because that would be a first here. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't have a gallery view.
So I think, Peg, what we'll do here is all, after I introduce myself, I'll go behind the scenes, see if we can loop anybody in if I can't solve it myself right away. So and we'll see if we can find a solution that works for everybody here. Okay. So everybody, I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm going to do what I can to try to make this technical glitch a little bit, a little bit better for you all. I've been speaking to folks like yourselves my entire career. So 17 plus years. I've probably done this, I know, in the thousands of times. Tonight's really cool, kind of special to me, being on here with both a Spanish translator as well as ASL, which I think is pretty awesome. And for me, it's a first, having both basically three mediums of communication in one night, which I think is really exciting. And I know all of you parents right now are probably scared out of your minds trying to figure out how do we send our kids off to college, and there's so much information that it's impossible to digest and know what's true, what's a myth. And that's why we're here tonight. That's why we do what we do, is to try to educate everybody that's going through this process, especially for the first time. We know how hard this is, and that's why, again, we've chosen this career path. Mine was based on personal experience. I come from two parents that didn't know what they were doing but just trying to do the best they could for their kids. And we didn't have the best end result from a financial perspective, specifically because of what a huge investment it is to pay for college. So we tried to figure out a better way to do that, and that is the genesis of our company. We've been fans from afar from Peg for a while, and we're really excited to be on the same team now. And she's going to coach you up tonight. And again, I'll be in the background answering any and all questions, I hope, beyond these technical glitches. But any questions you have, please throw them at me, and we'll do our very best to get everyone squared away.
All right. Well, I'm going to just start with a little story, and then we're going to get into my slides. So one night, I'm laying in bed, and my kids, who at the time were seniors in high school, so they're twins, named Shannon and Brennan, and I'm listening to them downstairs watching TV, and they're just laughing and having a great time. And I think to myself, I'm not going to hear this laughter next year when the kids go off to school. And I realize that I'm kind of sobbing, which is really odd because I'm not a crier. And I remember that feeling that I had that night, and it was several years ago. My kids have graduated college at this point. I remember that feeling like it was yesterday. And the reason that I'm sharing this is that I realize that a lot of you, maybe that have seniors, you're right in that chapter right now, right? You're right in that emotional situation. And even if your kids are in high school and a little bit younger, it's coming up, right? And it's really this perfect storm of emotions where, for parents, like, this is what you've been doing for 18 years, getting them ready to go on to the next chapter and be somewhat independent. So it's exciting, but at the same time, it's a little bittersweet because they are going off, right? They're going to be leaving and starting a new chapter. And I think for the kids, it's super exciting, right? Because they get to go off and be on their own and make all their own decisions. But then at the same time, I think even if kids don't want to admit it, it's a little scary. It's a little scary to go off on your own. So as I said, it's really this perfect storm of emotions. And I'm here to tell you, I totally understand where you are, and you will get through it. Just a lot of deep breaths, and you'll come through the other side. And tonight, I'm really hoping that Matt and I are going to share a lot of information that's going to relieve some stress around the financial side of this, which is a big deal. So basically, when my kids hit high school, my husband Bill and I, as many of you probably did, you start doing this deep dive into college, right? Your kids are in high school, you got to start thinking about it. And I realized really quickly what a lot of you have probably realized as well, is that it's much more confusing and complex than it was when we were kids. And the other thing I realized is that a lot of my friends and colleagues were not doing a deep dive. And this was causing a lot of stress between partners and spouses, and between parents and kids, right? And I had this aha moment where I thought, you know what? I have this decade plus of experience in financial planning and wealth management and working with families on saving for college. And I can couple that with this deep expertise that I've developed in college financial planning, and I can impact families even more. And so that's what I did. In 2014, I started my own business called Way to the Quad. And since then, I have helped hundreds of families and spoken to thousands of families like we are doing tonight, and really help them. My mission was really to help families navigate this whole college landscape so that they can understand their financial fit and find affordable colleges. And I was fortunate enough to meet the team at College Aid Pro years ago and helped beta test software that they were developing at the time. And we remained colleagues, and I've used their software, and it's been an integral part of how I support families for years. And it really, in a really exciting way, in the middle of September, I actually joined College Aid Pro, and they acquired my company. So it's been a really exciting change to have a team and to join like-minded people. We all have this deep expertise in this area, and really our main focus is helping families navigate this landscape. So let's jump in here. I'm going to share my screen.
Peg, let me sorry, pause you for one
Sure.
second, because the feedback seems to be that, and I don't know that we have the silver bullet here, but folks are only able to see the speaker still, seems to be the general consensus feedback, and they don't have the option for the gallery view, but apparently it turned on momentarily at 10:08. So I don't know if there was any button that you might have fooled around with in the background at all where it did.
Oh, I didn't touch anything while I was
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. So so it's bizarre. I can't figure it out. I mean, obviously we've done this before and haven't had this issue.
So if I don't have Laura pinned, then nobody's going to be able to see her. I wonder if it's because I have Laura pinned. I have Laura and Dina pinned for ASL.
Yeah, so that's
Dina, if you're muted, Dina.
Sorry, you don't really need to have us pinned because there's so few of us on the screen that it will be fine. So try to unpin her and see how that works out.
Okay, so let me go.
And please let me know for any attendees if you're seeing anything different than.
Okay, so I remove the pins. So can people write in and say if that's helping?
Okay, so we did, so, well, you know what, now it seems that we're getting kind of mixed results here. Some people are.
It looks like Laura is still pinned. She still has a pin on her little title there.
Yeah, she's not pinned.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see any. Yeah, I've unpinned both of you because I have the option to pin her. And so because I unpinned her.
Okay. Well, again, I again, everybody will do everything I can to troubleshoot behind the scenes here, and just wanted to see if there was a quick fix there, Peg. But you can get back to the content. I'll continue to answer questions.
Well, so people can't see the slides either.
Well, no, they could see the slides. Yeah, they could see the slides when you shared your screen.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, just interrupt me. Don't hesitate, Matt, if you need
Yeah,
me.
I will. And I'll
We
see what I can find out.
Support everybody here. Okay. So first thing, just a visual of my family. It's, sometimes it's fun. There's my kids and some of my canine kids. So just wanted to give you a quick visual. So basically, as I said in my intro, I've helped, hundreds of families, and I'm very confident when I say like you, because if any of these bullets that I'm putting up describe you, you make tons of money, you're struggling to get by, you're divorced or separated, you feel guilty that you haven't saved enough, or you've waited till the last minute to think about paying for college. If any of those sound familiar, it's all good. You're here. Pat yourself on the back, take a deep breath, and we're going to move forward. So my commitment, our commitment to you tonight is to teach you how to approach this college buying process. That's really what it is, right? In a proactive way. And by proactive, what I mean is not reacting to the colleges when they give you a financial aid award letter when your child's later on in their senior year. And I usually have a story that I share here, but I have this wonderful news story that a woman just shared with me yesterday. So I'm kind of popping that in. It was one of these stories that just warms your heart. So I was doing a consultation with a mom who has 2 older daughters. And she said to me, she's in our software, which all of you got an email urging you to jump into our free software before the webinar. So I hope some of you did that. But she was in that software and she made the comment that, like, with her older 2 daughters, they got into their dream colleges, but there was a lot of tears because they realized even though they got some money from the colleges, it wasn't enough and they couldn't afford to go. So they ended up staying in state at other schools because that's what was affordable. And she was so happy that because she's taking this proactive approach, and she didn't use that word, that's really what she meant with her son, who's a junior in college, that she can actually help him see what's affordable and build the list with affordability in mind. And that's really what we're trying to teach you tonight, how you can do that and to identify what kind of family you are so that you know how you can get some discounts. And I know it sounds a little cheesy, but in this process, knowledge truly is power. It really helps you when you're visiting schools. You know what questions to ask Office of Admissions and Financial Aid. You're really in a position of power to understand your situation. So there are 3 kinds of fit. There's academic, personal, and financial.
Peg, sorry, but for any, I just put in the chat that website because as Peg starts to talk in a second here about how this whole thing works, that if any of you didn't see the email that we sent, because it was only a couple of hours ago, where we encourage you to just set up your own account. It's something that you can do whether it's now or later, so you can just, as you're learning about this stuff we're about to embark on, you can get an idea of specifically how this formula is going to work for your family, and specifically how much the colleges that you're thinking about are going to cost. So I popped that website into the chat. So
yeah, and it's completely free. You go in, enter a little data, it takes a couple minutes, and then you're in there. And I'm going to be in there in a minute, so then I'll be navigating it. And if you've got yours open on another screen, then you can really see, you can look at my sample, but you can really look at your family. So it's pretty powerful. Okay. So there's 3 kinds of fit: academic, personal, and financial fit. Of course, tonight we're focusing on financial. All 3 are important, right? People tend to focus on the academic and personal, and like the story that I was saying about the mom a minute ago, they focused on that, got into dream schools, but they hadn't focused on financial. So it's really a trifecta. You really want to be focusing on all 3, and you're here and you're going to learn about your financial fit. So it'll be much easier to do that. So we're all good. So here's the process that I made this up when I was going through this with my kids, because I realized this is a process that all parents go through, and it makes it so much easier if you understand what's, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, if you understand what's coming up and where you're going, it's much easier to get there, right? So tonight, I'm going to take you through these steps at a very high level. And the 3rd step, I'm just going to touch on very briefly because that's its own webinar in and of itself. But again, I'm trying to give you an overview of the process. And for parents of seniors, you're in this process already. So some of this might be really helpful because you're in the process of doing some of these things right now. And for freshmen, sophomore, and junior parents, this is a great intro to where you're going. Okay, so let's start with this first step that I call pay less for college. So the first thing I want to tell you, and you might be kind of scratching your head, what is she talking about? But it's a buyer's market. And I'll show you an example in a minute. I don't want you to worry about these high sticker prices. And I know if you're a parent with high school kids, you're pretty aware of these prices that are, some of them are over $85,000 a year now, which is crazy. But I don't want you to search for schools based on sticker price. And I'm going to show you why. Here's an example of a student that I worked with years ago at this point. And the student, this is their actual awards. The student got into a public school and a private school. And these happen to be both schools in Washington, right? So the first red box you see up there, that's the sticker price. That's the cost of attendance that I'm talking about. So at the public school, the cost of attendance was about $27,000. At the private school, the sticker price was almost $51,000. So it would be easy to look at this and say a little bit over 100,000 versus 200,000. Get rid of the private school. We can't afford it, right? Well, let me show you what happened with this family. This family had an expected family contribution, and we're going to talk about what that is in a minute, of $21,500. And at the end of the day, these are the actual awards the student got from these schools. The net cost to the family, and when I say net cost, I mean only grants and scholarships are out of this. This isn't muddied with loan money. The public school was the same price because the student was awarded loans. The private school went from almost 51,000 to 30,000. So that's a really different conversation to have, a $3,000 difference versus almost double. And this happens, I'm not going to say it happens all the time, but it happens. You know, when I used to speak live pre-COVID, people would raise their hand and say, that happened to my son. So please don't shy away from the high sticker price schools, because depending on your family, that price could be seriously reduced. And we're going to get into that. So how is this happening? How that example, how does that happen? Colleges are all on sale. They're all discounting. It's just a matter of how they're discounting. And if you look at this slide, this was a study that was done over a decade from 2008 to 2018. And the increase in tuition and fees was about 47%, you can see on the left. But look at the increase in grant aid, in the discounts that colleges were giving. It was over 91%. So much higher percentage increase than the increase in tuition, which we're hearing about all the time and how expensive college is, right? So really it's a net increase of 18%, which is very different. So you want to know how to get these discounts, right? That's I'm hoping what's going through your mind now. I've got you thinking. And so basically, how do these colleges discount? Well, financial aid from endowments, that's what we're talking about, endowment money, comes in two different ways from the colleges. There's need-based / self-help aid. So you have to have financial need, right? And self-help means student loans and work study. So it's help, but you got to do something for it or you got to pay it back, right? And then the second kind is merit aid. So we're going to dig into these now. Let's first look at need-based aid and how that works. So it's a pretty simple equation. What it is it's the cost of attendance, which is the sticker price, minus this expected family contribution, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. That's how the colleges figure out what your financial need is. So let's break down the components here. So cost of attendance, tuition and fees, room and board, books, and then all colleges have one or two more line items that they call transportation and personal expenses. So that's the sticker price. We all know it's been going up for decades, right? Changes every summer. What is the expected family contribution? What this is this is the minimum annual amount that a student is expected to pay toward the cost of college. And I want to emphasize the words minimum and annual. Doesn't mean that that's all you're going to be expected to pay, okay? It's a minimum number. And that's honestly why you're submitting financial aid forms. I've talked to several families this fall with seniors. They've submitted forms and I ask them what their EFC is and they ask me, what is that? So they don't even understand what an EFC is and they've already submitted financial aid forms, right? So this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, EFCs. There's 3 different methodologies and we're going to go into detail on what's included in these EFCs because you've got to understand this if you want to understand need-based aid. So the main drivers of the EFC calculation, by far the biggest driver is parent income, okay? They take away there's an income protection allowance. They ask you what you're paying in federal income tax. They know you're paying Social Security and Medicare, and then they take what's left and they assess it and 22 to 47%. It's a big driver. They also look at parents' non-retirement assets. So not 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. Those are retirement accounts, but anything that's not in a retirement account is fair game. Then they look at kids' income and assets as well. That's not as big a driver because most kids aren't sitting on a lot of money and they don't have big incomes, obviously. They're students, right? Another piece that you would never know about if you don't do some reading or jump on a webinar like this is that voluntary pre-tax retirement contributions, which is very common, how most people do it. Money's pulled right out of your paycheck, pre-tax, goes into your 401k, 403b. And you notice on my slide, it says voluntary. So if your employer mandates it, this isn't applicable. But if you're choosing to save, which the financial planner in me tells you, please save, you need to save for retirement, the colleges add that back in. So that can be a big driver. If somebody's maxing out a 401k, they're over 50 and they're putting in 26,000 and both parents are, that's a lot of extra income that gets thrown in there. And then another piece is if like myself with twins, and if you have a junior and a senior, and you've got crossover years through the 23-24 school year, that can really impact your EFC as well. So those are the biggest drivers in this calculation. So now let's jump to the second step, which I call forms and figures. This is financial aid form. So if you're a senior, you're there. You might, a lot of senior parents, if you're on here, you maybe have already submitted the forms, right? And if you haven't, you've got deadlines coming up. So you're thinking about it. So this is good timing. So the FAFSA is the main financial aid form. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And almost every school in the country requires this. Most schools only require this form, and they use it to give out federal money, and they also use it to give out their endowment money. And remember, those discounts, that's where the significant discounts are coming from. They're coming from the college endowments. So big reason why you want to be submitting the FAFSA. So key highlights here, and I already hit the first one, retirement accounts are not included. The balances, if you've been a great saver and you've got a huge 401k, never put that on the FAFSA, okay? Retirement accounts are not included. If you own your home and you've got a market value minus your mortgage, that's your home equity. Your primary home equity, the home you live in, is not asked about on the FAFSA. It is not included in your EFC calculation. And if you're a business owner, which in this part of the world, there's some, a lot of entrepreneurs, if you have a business with less than 100 full-time employees, and it's a family-owned business, the value of your business is not included. That again is through the 23-24 school year, and then rules are going to change based on a law that was passed last year by Congress. Income from your business still flows onto your tax return, but the value of your business is not included. There's a few other things that aren't included, but those are the biggies that are applicable to most people. Another,
can I jump in for a hot second here, because we got some pretty good questions. One of them as it pertains, a couple as it pertains to real estate, right? So to reiterate what Peg said, because it's a really common mistake that people make that hurts their financial aid eligibility, and that is they include their home equity when completing the FAFSA, right? And I don't blame them, because the FAFSA is it asks you for the net worth of your investments, and it doesn't do much in the way of elaborating on that, especially retirement accounts, right? Because again, we're not to include retirement accounts on the FAFSA, and they only say that in the fine print. So that's really critical. Now, the CSS profile, which Peg will touch on, but that is a financial aid application that a lot of these private colleges require in addition to the FAFSA. They are going to ask you about your real estate, specifically.
Yeah, I'm going to do that in a minute.
You'll talk about that. So, but there's another question here, and this is a little bit of a gray area, so I'll do my best in how I answer this, but it's how do we handle investment property on the FAFSA, right? And there's a couple ways that you can answer this question, and the way it was posed to me was, is there any way around this as it pertains on the FAFSA, right? And it kind of depends who you ask, and I could say that about a lot of questions, in this, but if you call most colleges to ask that question, I think that they're going to recommend that you put the equity that you have in your real estate on the FAFSA. Now, the other side of that argument, and this is ultimately a choice that you have to make as an individual of what side you fall on here, is that you're not to report the assets or value of your business on the FAFSA if you have less than 100 employees. Okay, so some individuals are of the mindset that if I have an investment property, that's a business. It has its own tax ID and it has income and expenses. That's a business that has less than 100 employees. I'm not going to report it. Whereas other folks choose to report it because they think that it's another piece of real estate and it should be included. So it's a gray area, and you're going to get different questions, but that's kind of how it's actually, that's how the question is asked on the FAFSA, and those are your options in terms of how to answer that.
Yeah, and if your business is in a business structure, if your real estate is in a business structure, then it is a business. But as Matt said, some people are like, well, it is a business, it just might not be in the business structure. So it is a bit of a gray area. Okay. This is another thing about the FAFSA that is a really nice planning opportunity. This again is through the 23-24 school year. I should have put that on the slide because this is going to change. But the way that the FAFSA works currently is that only the custodial parent is included on the FAFSA. And that's going to continue. It's just after the 23-24 school year, the definition of the custodial parent is going to change. The definition of the custodial parent now is basically the parent where the child spends the most time in a year look back from when you're hitting submit on that financial aid form. So if you're submitting the FAFSA tomorrow, that's November 18th. It's basically a year look back. It doesn't matter what's in your divorce agreement. It's just the reality of where your child has spent more time. And a lot of families are 50-50 custody. And I always tell people, well, there's 365 days in the year, and that's an odd number. So technically, you can't be 50-50, right? It's going to be a little more, and I'm being a little facetious, but it's accurate, right? So you never want to lie. You always want to be honest on these forms. But if you know that, excuse me, that's a planning opportunity, right? So if it works for your child emotionally and the family, it works for the family, for the child to spend a little bit more time with the parent that makes less money, that could be a really nice opportunity to maybe be eligible for need-based aid maybe, whereas in another scenario you wouldn't. So please keep this in mind about the FAFSA. And here's an example of a family that I worked with years ago. And, the mom, they're divorced. The mom didn't make a lot of money, was renting, didn't own her home, and not a lot of assets. The dad had made a lot more money. Remember, that's the biggest driver, as I shared, has some assets and owned his home. And if you look at the bottom in the yellow, that's the difference between one EFC with her and one with both of them. The dad was shocked by this, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. It's a massive planning opportunity. So you've already seen my dogs and you're going to see more dogs. This was one of my dogs. He's gone now. This is Sal. But whenever there's a big planning opportunity, because I get so jazzed about this because there's so many opportunities for families to plan, and me being able to share this with you opens your eyes to that so that you can find great financial fits for your kids as well as academic and personal, right? So if you are a divorced or separated family, you don't have to be legally divorced. This is the way it's working for the next couple of years. So just keep that in mind. So the second financial aid form that Matt was just referencing is called the CSS profile. This is administered by College Board. So if your kids have taken AP classes, have taken the PSAT, SATs, that's all College Board. They're in the system. They've got a username and password. So this is another piece of the puzzle that College Board handles. There's less than 300 schools, mostly private. There's a few publics in there like Michigan and UVA, William and Mary, UNC Chapel Hill. That might be all of them. The rest of them are private. So what they do is you submit this second financial aid form. It's not in lieu of the FAFSA. You submit both. That's really important. And the key difference is when we look at the EFC calculation, because there's going to be a second EFC calculated, is that most of the time your primary home equity is on the table. It's different depending on the school. The non-custodial parent for divorced or separated situations is usually included, and businesses are always on the table. So you have 5 businesses, they're going to ask you about all of them, right? And they're going to get into details on it. So those are key differences. For most people, the primary home equity is the biggest driver that can cause differences in the 2 EFCs. And of course, just like almost everything in this process, no 2 colleges do things exactly the same. It would just be way too easy, right? And I say that, you know, kind of joking, but honestly, you wouldn't need Matt and I, you wouldn't need this webinar if everything was transparent and the same at all schools. So this is how it works for these schools. They're calculating a second EFC. It's a proprietary calculation, the opposite of the federal EFC, which is very transparent and the same at every school, okay? So this is another planning opportunity. Doesn't mean that CSS profile schools that require that form are bad. You just need to know that, right? Because that's an important piece of data. So another planning opportunity. So at this point, I'm going to read your mind a little bit here. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, I don't think I'm eligible for need-based aid based on what Peg's talking about. Or I'm not sure if I am. The answer to that question, what you're really looking for is what's my EFC, because that's really what you need to know. It's not the whole kit and caboodle. It's the tip of the iceberg of understanding where you fit for this whole financial fit. So what I want to do now is I'm going to jump into MyCap. I'm going to jump into our software that all of you guys can get in. And you've got the link, and hopefully some of you are already in here. I'm hoping that. So when we're looking up here, what you see up here are the 3 EFCs. This is for my sample family that I've added in. So the first one is your federal EFC. So basically that's the industry jargon. That means that's what comes off the FAFSA. And as I said earlier, very transparent. If you haven't submitted the FAFSA, when you do, the next page is a confirmation page. So don't jump for joy that you're done and close out that browser and walk away. Print that page first, because then you've got confirmation you submitted it, and your EFC is going to be right on that confirmation. So you immediately can see what it is. But if you put in your data here, you'll get a pretty spot on estimate of your federal EFC. So colleges that only require the FAFSA are going to use this number to figure out if you have need-based aid eligibility. So when you plug that in, if that number is 100,000, thank God no schools cost $100,000 yet. You don't have any need-based aid eligibility, right? But in this example, this family has a $41,000 EFC. Well, at a school like Chapman that costs, I'm rounding up, $83,000, there's quite a bit of need there. There's $42,000 of need. So that's what the colleges are doing. They're doing the math, and then they're figuring out how much need you have. This other number, these other 2 numbers are the CSS profile EFCs. They're only applicable to schools that require that. So the institutional EFC, all that means is they require the CSS profile. That's the industry jargon. You can see the numbers higher. And for my example, it's because they have home equity, like I said earlier. So there's an estimate of how much home equity is included. This consensus EFC, just think of that as a subset of the institutional. That's a small group of schools that have agreed to a certain treatment of primary home equity. We don't need to get in, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much, but it is a third EFC that, like, for example, Cornell uses, okay? So that's EFCs. So let me hop back over to my slides here. And let's talk about the other way that colleges are discounting. And then I'm going to hop back into MyCap and look at schools in a little bit more depth. So the second way that they can discount is through merit aid. So merit is the non-need-based aid. So through the years with Way to the Quad, and now that I'm at CAP, I'd say at least half of the families that I've supported, they don't have need-based aid eligibility, right? Their EFCs are too high. That doesn't mean that they can afford $60, $70, $85,000 a year times 4 times 2 or 3 kids, right? I know I couldn't, right? When I had my 2. So we're all looking for a great fit for our kids, and we're looking for discounts. So for some families, merit is the name of the game, right? Bill Gates's kids can get merit aid. It doesn't matter how much money you make. So it's typically grades, test scores, it can be athletics, it can be talent. So let's talk about merit aid and how it's different from need-based aid. So first of all, merit aid is offered through the Office of Admissions, not financial aid. Financial aid gives out the need-based, admissions gives out merit. Merit aid is purely an enticement to get that student to attend. So your child applies to schools, and some senior parents, you might already have this happening in your families, right? Your student applies. If it's a rolling school, maybe they've already gotten in, and in that letter, it might say, congratulations, you're awarded the Provost Scholarship for $60,000. What that school is telling your child is, we awarded you a scholarship that's worth $15,000 a year. They don't have any idea what your ability is to pay. You might not have even submitted financial aid forms yet, right? But they are already starting that discounting process that I talked about at the beginning. So that's really what merit aid is. As I said, usually based on grades and test scores. And as everything in this process goes, it really depends from school to school how they handle merit aid, also how they handle need-based aid. But let's look at that. So some schools offer some really nice merit. And when I say that throughout this presentation, what I'm talking about is 5 figures a year, right? I'm not talking about $1,000 discount off of a $60,000 bill. So the schools on the left here, which is just a few that I picked out, right, that I could find nice little graphics for, they offer some very nice merit aid for students that they're trying to attract, like I said earlier. There's other schools that offer really good need-based aid. They meet 100% of need, which is great. Like that example I showed you in my cap, where there's $42,000 of need. Chapman isn't one of those schools that meets 100%, but the Ivies and the schools you see here, they meet 100% of need. You're getting $42,000. And some of it might be favorable loans, and some schools are even no loan. So they don't even give the students loan. So it really depends on the school, and it's not either or. Some schools offer both, right? So this is really important information to have, and it's a planning opportunity. Again, if merit is the name of the game for your family, then if you build a list filled with highly selective, from an admissions standpoint, schools that give out 0 merit, even for kids that have perfect GPAs and perfect ACTs and SATs, you're not going to get any money. So you're going to be looking for outside money, or you're going to be writing a full check. So if you decide to do that, that's great. I did my job. But if you go in with your eyes closed and you're shocked, that's what we're trying to avoid. At that point, you're reactive, you're not proactive. Okay, so now I've basically shared with you how this discounting, what forms of discounts are out there. So the question you're probably thinking is, well, okay, you're telling me it depends on the college. So how do I know? How do I know who requires what forms? How do I know how they do discounts? So let's take a minute here and let's jump back into my cap. My Zoom controls get in the way here. And let's look at this. So let's dig into a couple of these schools. So Chapman, a school in California, it's really popular out here. So let's look at it. Let me move my little screens here. Let's scroll down here and look at the information that you have. From an admission standpoint, you can immediately see the middle 50% at Chapman, right? This is self-reported information by the colleges, but it's very important information if you're looking for merit aid, right? If your child is above the middle 50% and they offer merit aid, much better chance to get merit, right? So this is all really, we're focusing on financial tonight, but this is really important because it ties into that. There's a lot of other great information that's admission based here as well. Then we can look at the financial aid. So you've got the sticker price here again, and then EFC basis. This tells you, is this a school that only requires the FAFSA, or are you getting into the CSS profile? And you can see on your dashboard your EFCs. So you can always know, okay, that's my ballpark of my EFC, and you can have in your mind what your need might be, right? So Chapman's a FAFSA only school. They, on average, and I want to emphasize that this is on average, it's not dead ringer for every student. They meet about 75% of need, okay? So it's a decent amount. Not all schools can afford to meet 100% of need. They just don't have the endowments to support it. The other piece of data that's really valuable for all of you is the percent receiving non-need merit. That's the stuff that doesn't require a low income. It doesn't require need, right? So 18% of kids at Chapman are receiving merit, about a fifth, right? And the average merit award is $20,500. And again, this is an annual number. This is not a 4-year number. So that's a nice discount, $81,000, $82,000, right? So that's some really key information that you have at your fingertips. In the free version, you can plug in 3 schools, plug in your child's top 3 schools. If you upgrade, you can put in unlimited, but you can put in the top 3 and have all this information at your fingertips. Then there's also some outcomes information. So if your child has an idea of what they want to major in, you got it in there. In my example, it's engineering. And this gives you 1, 5, and 10-year out average salaries for kids in that major at Chapman. So this brings in kind of the conversation about return on investment, which is something that should kind of be on your mind when you're thinking about these things, right? So all this information is here. And then if the school offers merit, you're going to see, as it says up here, all the available merit scholarships at all of these colleges. And so when you plug in your information, when you go in, you're going to plug in your child's test scores and GPA, and the software will automatically pick a scholarship, but this is your planning tool. So you can go in and change these, right? You can click and say, you know what, I think he's going to do better the next time. Let's look at this. Or, you know what, I want to be a little bit more conservative. Let's click down. But you've got the whole database here at your fingertips. And each scholarship, you've got a little bit of additional information as well. So this helps, because people are always like, where do I get this information? What websites do I go to? It's all right here. And then the software will lay out, and we're gonna dig into this a little bit more. But you're on this page, we're honing in on the net 1-year cost. We're gonna look at the 4-year cost in a few minutes, because that's really what you want to concentrate on. Okay. So that is that piece. So now I want to hop back over here. Let's hop back into my slides again. I have to keep moving everything here. Okay. So how does this all work as far as timing? So senior parents, this might be a little bit of a, just give you an overview again, but for younger parents, this should be really helpful. So there's a thing called prior year tax. It's called PPY. You might have seen it in the media. Something that President Obama instituted, back when he was president. So what it means is, as I said earlier, you're going to be plugging in income and assets into these financial aid forms. And the tax year, the income that you're going to be asked about is a 2-year prior year. So the easiest way to remember this is think about when your child's going to school. So if you have a senior, they're starting this fall 2022. Just subtract 2 from the year, and that's the tax year that you're going to be reporting on for that year in college. So all you senior families that are filling out forms, it's all about 2020. So it's a 2-year look back, which actually makes it easier, because by the time the forms go live on October 1, which is my last bullet, most people have filed their return. October 1, 2021, most people have filed their 2020 return. So that's how it works for income. Now, assets are completely the opposite. The value of your assets is literally the day you hit submit. So there's a lot more wiggle room around, oh, I'm going to remodel my kitchen. I should spend that money. Oh, I've got some credit card debt. Should I pay some of that off? And playing around with that to see how that affects your EFC. So very different timelines for income and assets. This is another planning opportunity because with prior year, what I want you to realize is if I have any sophomore parents listening, the tax year that you're going to be reporting on when your child's a senior starts in January. So January 1 of the sophomore year in high school is the beginning of that tax year. So knowing that ahead of time is really valuable because you can avoid creating income that you don't need to create. I just helped people the other day and they had massive capital gains. And I said, you might want to talk to your financial advisor and minimize that as much as you can, you know, not to the detriment of your portfolio, but I see people all the time and are like, oh, I sold this and created a big capital gain. And, you know, it would have been better if they hadn't. So knowing that ahead of time is a good thing. Of course, if you get a bonus or a promotion, you're not going to turn that down for financial aid, right? But certain things can be avoided on a tax return. So that's a nice planning opportunity. Okay, so the third step here, I don't even have a slide on this one. To me, this is the most fun step, but this is a webinar and a whole conversation in and of itself. But this is when later on senior year, your kids are getting into schools and they're getting what's called a financial aid award letter that comes from the Office of Financial Aid that lists, this is our cost, and these are all the discounts you may be getting in the form of loans and work study and grants and scholarships, right? And so in this step, you're analyzing these, you're figuring out if you should be appealing, you're trying to understand how to appeal. And all I want to say here, what I want to point out is, yes, you can appeal for need-based aid and merit aid. Need-based aid statistically tends to be, you get more positives, but that I help people all the time with merit, and so does Matt, and it is successful, right? It just depends on the schools and their yields and a lot of different things, but it can be done. And no, they're not going to rescind your child's admission offer if you ask for more money, right? But just like everything in life, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And these are things that we're actually going to be supporting our families on. I'm going to talk about our academy in a few minutes. That's free to everybody who's in our platform in any capacity. And we're going to be educating you about this. But that's the only thing that I want to say here is that's the step you're going to be in pretty soon for senior families. And yes, you can appeal, and don't worry about it being thought of badly by the schools. They're expecting it. They have a whole department that deals with this stuff. Okay. So that's that step. Oh, the other thing, and I know Matt would want me to mention this, in our software, it's in development. We're working on it now. You're going to be able to upload your award letters and plug them in. And so I'll talk about that when we're in there. That's another great feature that will be available to everybody, free version, everybody, that'll help you make these great decisions. So the last step that I call your adventure awaits. This is when you're getting to the end. You've got a short list for seniors. And also, I would say this is also something that I recommend you're doing as you're building the list on a projected basis. And then when you get to the end, you're doing it with the actual awards, but both times you're doing this. And when I say you're doing this, what I mean is you're looking at the affordability in a 4-year window. We call it how to pay. We call it affordability. We have different ways that we reference it, but let's take a look at this. So this is your dashboard with all your EFCs. And so I pointed out this first year net cost, but when we get to this point, what you really want to look at is the 4-year cost. And if there is a funding gap, right? If you don't have enough money. So let's look at affordability at some of these schools. So we've been honing in on Chapman, so we can look at Chapman here. You've got a 4-year net cost of $245,000. This family has what we call a college pre-approval of $100,000. When you go through and get into the software, there's a question that says, how much can you afford to put toward college for a year? I want you to estimate that. If you haven't thought about it, I want you to start thinking about it, because that's a really important thing. When you're going to buy a car, you think about what you can afford, right? And when it comes to college, people don't think about it, right? But it's a really important thing to think about. And that's something that you're going to be able to manipulate, because there's different pieces that come into this. If you have a 529, if you have outside help from grandma, all this different stuff. But for my example, this family could afford $25,000 a year. So that's their pre-approval number. So their 4-year net cost minus their pre-approval, that's your loans, right? That's your funding gap. It doesn't necessarily have to be total loans. And I'm going to go back to my slides, and we're getting close to wrapping up here, and talk about the different types of loans so you understand that. But what we're showing you down here is, if that were all loans, if that ended up being all loans, and this student went to Chapman, over a 10-year repayment, you can see the full amount, you can see the monthly payment, and for a 25-year, the same thing. The other thing that we point out is, for that major, the average, the take-home pay is about $3,700. And this is specific to Chapman, right? Because you see it's different for Cornell, it's different for University of Oregon. So that's a huge percentage of that. So we're trying to make it really clear at this stage. When you're in projected sophomore, junior, you don't have to get in the weeds here as much. But when you're making that decision for the senior families here, this is something you want to look at. And we've got a nice key that we created here, where it's our opinion, but some of this, a lot of people in the industry would agree with. Of course, ideal is no loans as far as affordability. Great is if you're only taking out the federal direct student loans that I'm going to explain in a minute. And then it's good if your projected base salary, annual salary for a year, if you're staying at that or under that. If you're getting over that, that's an indicator that you should have some caution, right? You should be careful with that. And in our tool, when you're thinking about loans, we've got some nice how to borrow information here that you can click on. You know, we're just trying to support, right? We're not encouraging, really. We're really trying to, Joe Messinger, one of the founders at College A Pro, says, you know, we're trying to stop, to decrease the student loan crisis one family at a time, you know, stop it, right? So we're not encouraging loans, but we realize, like, a lot of families, loans are part of the college funding strategy. So we're providing information here on that. One thing, since I'm here, I'll just switch gears a teeny bit, because I love this part of what we're supporting for families. I mentioned the Academy a while ago. This is something that's available to all families, and it's right up here on your dashboard. You click there, you get in. We've got courses and just really valuable information. And last month, I shot a line by line of the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So I encourage parents that have not submitted their forms to go in there and check that out. And even if you have, you might want to watch them, because it might point out, you know, it might point out some stuff to you. So that's—
Hey, let me interrupt you for 1 second, because the timing is good here. So one of the questions we had was, one of the attendees learned, oh no, I submitted the FAFSA, and I included the balance of my IRA accounts on the FAFSA. Right. So this individual has a way higher EFC than they actually should. How do they make that correction? So the short answer to that question is, you can log back into the FAFSA. And when you put in your FSA ID, your essentially username and password that you had to create to complete and submit that form, you can log back in there, and you will see when you do that, you have the opportunity to select an option that says make corrections. And then it'll bring you back into the form, you edit it, you put that actual answer, the correct answer in there, and you resubmit it. But the reason why I mentioned that, I just popped a link into the chat. I will put it here into the Q&A as well. So we're doing a webinar just about a month from now, December 14th, which again, that anybody wants to attend. It's basically going over, again, the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And specifically, if we made a mistake, if we learned something since the time we submitted that form, how do we make the changes? What is best practice there? That's kind of the focus of that entire webinar. We'll get more granular in these applications themselves and talk about the process of Now, how do I go back to these colleges and, try to improve upon what they might offer me based on what I put on the applications? We'll spend some time elaborating on what Peg talked about. Essentially, how do we negotiate with these colleges? Will be a piece of that. Another thing I want to make sure that I hit on, because we got the question a couple times, what about my 529 accounts? What about if I know for you Washington residents, if you have a GET account, which are essentially treated the same way. But the important thing here, and again, a very, very common mistake, a lot of families that have 529s make the incorrect assumption that it is the student's account, right? Which I totally get. It's for college. Their name is on the statement and their social security number, and we would think it's for them. And that's how so many families report it. Not only is that incorrect, but it's really going to hurt your EFC, because money in the student's name has a lot more weight than money in the parent's name. Okay. So again, if you made that mistake on the FAFSA or the CSS profile, it's really worthwhile to make that change, because again, the 529s are owned by the parents. The students are just the beneficiary there. So I had a couple questions around that. I want to make sure that I hit on.
Sure. Thanks for that, Matt.
Sure.
Okay. So focus here. The takeaway here is you really want to look at this in a 4-year window. Really, really, because it's a 4-year expense. The colleges would prefer you don't do that, but you really want to do that. So let me jump over, because as I said, a lot of times loans are going to be part of meeting this funding gap. I want to just take a few minutes. I know we're getting a little bit over time here, I think, because we had a little bit of that. We're spending some time around the translation stuff. So I will do my best to go quickly here, because I want to respect your time. I just want to quickly cover the different, this to me is the only student loan that's really out there. And the reason I say that is because this is the loan that is really under your child's social security number. It's their debt, has nothing to do with parents, or there's no co-signing. And so it's given by the federal government. The only thing your child needs to do is submit the FAFSA. You're automatically eligible. If you have financial need, you'll get part of the loan will be a subsidized student loan, which means no interest until 6 months after graduation. So it's a great deal, right? The numbers on the left are the maximum for subsidized student loans. So if you add that up, that's $19,000 over 4 years. Not a huge sum to get a good 4-year education. The colleges can also throw on another $2,000 of unsubsidized. So if you have need, you'll get $3,500 and then $2,000 of unsubsidized. Same loan, just interest starts accruing when it's dispersed, like a regular loan. So Bill Gates's kids, as I said earlier, would get $27,000 of unsubsidized loans. These loans are use it or lose it. So again, you really want to map out your 4-year plan. You don't want to use up your GET, use up your 529s, and then get to junior year and say, I need those loans from freshman and sophomore year. You can't go back and get them. So make sure you map out how you're going to pay for college. And again, that's coming in MyCap soon, and you'll be able to do that. The interest rate this year is 3.734. It changes every year. It's linked to the 10-year treasury note, but it's a fixed interest rate for that year and that loan. So you don't have interest rate risk. If you are going to do loans, this is by far the best place to start. And the other big positive of this loan is that because it's under your child's social, they start developing a credit history, which is a good thing. When they get into adulthood and they're wanting to sign a lease, it's good that they have some credit and they're not coming back to you to co-sign a lease. And I speak from experience on that because my kids did have credit and they were on their own. In the interest of time, I'm not going to get in the weeds on this. I just want to explain there are some state loans, but the main 3 groups are the one I just talked about, and you're going to have this slide so you can review it in the email tomorrow. There's also a federal parent loan, much higher interest rate, and in my opinion, a very high origination fee. And the colleges can give it to you for everything minus what they give you in aid. So parents get into hot water pretty quickly with this one. So you just want to be careful. And then there's also outside, I'm going to do my little rabbit ears, student loans. The reason why I'm doing that is because you're going to be co-signing. So it's your debt as much as it is your kids, and the federal Parent Plus loan is all your debt, has nothing to do with your kids. So these are the main three areas. Focus on the direct, at Stafford is in there because that's the old name and sometimes you see it. So I just want people to know that that's out there. So another planning opportunity, make sure if you're not going to accept student loans that you do it knowing you don't need them. Because when you submit that FAFSA, you're going to be eligible. So we're about ready to wrap up here. So what I'd like to do is just spend a minute talking about your next steps and how we can support you, because if we've done our job, you really have more planning you want to do here, right? So that you can get to the bottom of all this financial fit fun stuff we're talking about today. So we've gone through this whole process. I think you have a good idea of where you're going, which should relieve some stress as well. So let me just hit for a few minutes. There's three ways we can really support you. So the free MyCap, which some of you are probably already in, I hope you are, and you were following along, which comes with a lot of the things I showed you, the 3 schools, all that stuff. The academy, there's also a community where you can go in. Matt and I are going to be in there answering questions. We're going to start having live office hours. That's all at your fingertips. So you've got the software and then you've got some support. The next level is if you want the paid version, it's $149 a year. We've got a special discount for you, which I'll post in a minute, or you can pay monthly. You get unlimited schools. There's an advanced college search where you can put in parameters, search by merit. I didn't show you that, but that's in there. There's also access to a private scholarship database, because that might be part of how you fill that gap. The other way is if you want to upgrade your software, but you're like, you know what, I really want to talk to somebody. I've got some weird stuff with my situation and I'd like to have a strategy meeting. Then we call that the valedictorian. That's $299. So it comes with the scholar, but also you got an hour with me. And so for people on this webinar, we're offering this 33% discount. And this is good until Friday night. So think about it, jump on it. We're happy to offer the discount. The other thing I want to share is when you get, I'm not going to even say when you're in the free MyCap, because I know you're going to go in there, if even with the discount, being able to upgrade to Scholar is just a little bit too much to handle financially, which we totally understand. There's been a lot of hardship with COVID and everything going on. We don't want to leave anybody behind. So if you get in there and you can't afford that $99, please just email us through the software and no questions asked. We are trusting that people are being honest. We will send you a code and you will have a year of access for free. So please don't let that be a barrier for you to take the next step and actually get even deeper in your planning. So that's
let me just piggyback on there real quick, Peg, just quickly here, because I think it's, again, our hope is we do the best we can in an hour here, right? But oftentimes, even if we give a great presentation, you might leave here with more questions than you had coming in, even if you learned a few new things. So our goal is to continue to support everybody. And these are, 3 different ways we think we can do it. If you're in the free version, great. And you'll still have access to us. We have live office hours every other week, and we actually moderate the community within there. So, when you pop a question in there, it's going to be Peg, myself, one of us that, again, do this for a living every day. If you do the paid upgrade, you have your unique discount code. And again, if you can't afford the for whatever it is, it's $10 a month with the upgrade, just email us. We honor that. We don't vet it. We don't ask questions. You're comped. And again, if you're a family that's got a unique situation, a business owner, maybe you're going through a divorce, or you want Peg to take a look at your financial aid applications, that's kind of what that 1 hour strategy session is for. So we hope you lean on us in whatever capacity. And then again, kind of in that vein, I will just pop in we're doing another webinar like I said, it's December 14th. Just so you have that link if you want to register. I'm sure you'll forget. I'll forget, and I'm doing the webinar. So that's why I have to have the reminders.
Well, and you'll get an invite too.
Right.
We just thought since we're talking to you and it's relevant. So the easiest way to do any upgrading, if you're interested, is in the right-hand corner when you're in there in the free version, you just click here and you can choose whatever. Mine, in my sample one, I've already upgraded, but that's all you need to do and you're good to go. So let's wrap up here because as I said, I know we're a little over time. So real quick, I just want to send home, here's my kids graduating from high school. Here they are, graduated from college. My son used to live in Capitol Hill. They're on his porch. They're adults. They're supporting themselves. And I followed this process. My son had 2 schools. He had been flown out to one. These were his 2 top schools. One school in Pennsylvania. He had fun, went out for a weekend and partied. And of course, he wanted to go there. I did my 4-year how to pay, just how I'm counseling you guys. And it was $70,000 more. And we looked at him and said, you know what, Brennan? I knew the other school was a better fit for him anyways, but I said, you know what? We've shared with you how much we're willing to pay and from what sources, and this other school just isn't affordable. And he looked at us and said, great, I'll go to the other school. And he had a great experience. He liked both schools, but I didn't have the friction and the stress that I see friends and family and I try and help my families avoid. So I'm really here to tell you it works. This is such a special time with your kids and it's filled with exciting things, but also some stressful things and all those emotions I talked about at the beginning. So following this process, it really does help. And we're here to support you. And I always end my webinars with this picture because I feel like before you know it, you're going to be waving goodbye to them as they drive away. Or with my 2 kids, I'm going to get choked up even saying it. I'm looking in the rearview mirror and they're standing there waving at the dorm. It's going to be here before you know it. So definitely jump in. Don't put your head in the sand on this and just learn about your family situation and it'll help relieve stress. And then you can set expectations for your kids, which is so valuable to model that and to have that time together. So, Matt, I'm thinking that you've probably mastered many of the questions, but are there any other questions that we want to handle here before we sign off?
No, it looks like we're all caught up. We did almost 100 questions, which I think is pretty good, right? So and we seem to be, again, I'll take any that are coming in at the wire here, but Peg, you got a lot of compliments as always. It seems you nailed it again, and it was awesome. Hopefully we solved for a lot of the communication issues we had earlier. I did make a promise that I'm happy to follow through on that if we did not, we'll figure out how to make it right and support those folks that didn't get communicated to the way that we had intended. So we'll figure out how we make that happen. And again, everybody tomorrow is going to get the presentation itself, the recording, and again, you'll have ongoing support from us, and however you decide to take advantage of that, if you decide to at all.
Yeah, please get into that freemium. It's you saw it, you see all the information that you have, and it's a great resource to have out there, and we're happy to support it any way we can. And we hope to see you in the community and in the academy, and have a great night, everybody. And, happy early Thanksgiving as well. That's going to be a week from tomorrow. So
happy Thanksgiving.
All right, guys.
Bye, buddy.
Stay well. Take care.
Take care.